A new directive from Nigeria's Securities and Exchange Commission is causing waves in the capital markets as the SEC imposes tenure limits on directors of major market operators. Under the new rule, directors of capital market operators designated as significant public interest entities can serve a maximum of 10 consecutive years in the same company and 12 years across the same group structure. The SEC has also introduced a 3-year cool-off period for CEOs and executive directors who have reached the end of their tenure before they can be appointed as chairman, with their chairman roles capped at 4 years. The rule already has many capital market operators rattled, and we are joined by Mary Ekemeze, a corporate commercial lawyer, to discuss what this means for the country's capital markets and how players should prepare. I think first we will begin with just looking at what role non-independent executive directors play in a company.
Okay, so independent non-executive directors, that's a mouthful, so I'm going to call them INEDs for the purpose of this conversation. Play a very critical role, right? They are, before I even start with their role, let's look at their qualifications under the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, right? For you to be an INED, you can't have any material relationship with a company. If you were a consultant of some sort, auditor, lawyer, whatever, there must have been at least a 3-year cooling period. You can't be a relative or a board member. If you own any shares, like 0.0001%. So already that shows us that we're looking for someone who has no relationship to this company and who's coming in unattached, is neutral, And so we're looking for someone who's neutral. Of course, the person must have all the other qualifications the director should have. They have to understand those roles. Someone who's able to bring independence of thought and objectivity to the board and who's impartial. I don't really know anybody. I'm just coming to serve. So now that we have an idea of who can be an independent director, it gives us a sense about why they're important to the board. Because they're able to look at because they're not so close to the problem and, they're coming in afresh with a fresh pair of eyes. They're bringing independence of thought. They're bringing fresh perspectives that we may not have considered. They're able, because they have less background influences affecting them, they're more able to act in the best interest of the company. Doesn't mean all the other directors are not acting, but all the other directors, the executives, right, they play 2 roles. They're both employees and directors. It's not the same. So the INEDs bring neutrality, ensure that, the integrity of the board is preserved. They ensure that they are there to sort of push forward or help the other members of the board, just sort of keep an eye on the role on, is this really in the best interest of the company? Are we doing this for the shareholders' interests? Are we considering everybody, shareholders, employees, the environment in which we operate, or are we just doing this for specific interests? And then because, certain committees, right, nomination, audit, remuneration, we need an INED. Because then the audit sort of looks at what's going on with the finances of the company. They're able to sort of catch what others may not see, because they're also thinking about, for them, liability because they're directors, but also, look, I'm here to sort of provide objective perspectives. What are others not saying? Because they're too close to this. Remuneration, it's an ongoing concern in almost any industry you can think about today. The gaps between executive compensation packages and other members of a team. And then sometimes it does look as if, the executive members are just stuffing their pockets. So having an INED head that committee and sort of decide this is what the bandwidth does is also, they're thinking, what should they earn? What shouldn't they earn? Now imagine that an INED who knows that the practice in this firm or this company is that I'm going to transmute eventually to an ED position. How objective and neutral are they going to be? There's a conflict of interest just down there in determining what the remuneration package is. So are we sure that when they were deciding this, it was in the best interest of the company, or were they thinking about, oh, down the line, I will get into this role, right? So that's the concern. Nomination, they sort of have a sense in who gets onto the board, what the criteria for getting people on the board are. If they were thinking about, I'm going to transmute, were they also thinking about, oh, potentially who can I recommend? So it's also to prevent conflict of interest. That's why I think, this is what I think is driving this change, to prevent and to preserve the integrity of the governance of the board.
Okay, so how does this track with what we see in other jurisdictions? Is it like global practice for regulators to try to limit how frequently this happens?
Yes, it's everywhere. It is. I mean, every other place there is one term limits. That's the, and then two, there are checks and balances. Okay. And so usually, what is it called? Every jurisdiction sees the same problem that we have. To be honest, in Nigeria, it's not new. I should mention that CBN in 2023 already did this, had the same rule. So this is not new in the Nigerian space. But even other jurisdictions have this. Now, what other jurisdictions sometimes do is if you do want to do that transmutation, then there has got to be a disclosure and a compelling reason. So if you're saying, look, we can't, we have, we can't find a replacement right now for an ED. This is what it is. There's a disclosure, there's risk management, there's stakeholder engagement to understand why, and before. So there is a justification for that. But that's very rare. That's not something that happens. But the same sort of concerns around transmutation, happens in other jurisdictions, because the end goal is to preserve the integrity of the board, ensure objectivity, and ensure that the independent director is still at all times impartial. And also we want sort of, fresh blood, on the, if it's the same person. So I was an INED role, right? I do my 3 terms. So you can't do more than 3 terms. Okay. I do my 3 terms, 3 years of 3, total 9 years, right? I do my 3 terms. And then I transmute to non-executive. Yeah. Let's even say I transmute to non-executive, right? Then I do maybe another 2 years, 9 and 2. 11. That's 8 years. That's 2 terms, right? Yeah, that's 8 years. That's about 17. Or maybe I even do just one 4-year term as a non-executive. So that's 9 plus 4, 11. And then I become the MD. And I do another 1 year or 2 years. Yeah. It defeats the purpose. It could be seen as a backhand way of grooming successorship. And trying to sort of, so as if from day one we already knew whether this person. So on the face of it, they're independent, but we know the end game is that we're grooming them. So if we're grooming someone, how much of an independence was there,
Yeah. Okay. So, like you just pointed out, there's also a cool-off period for CEOs transitioning to become chairman of the board. Why do you think the SEC wouldn't want? And the cool-off period is 3 years. But why do you think the SEC wouldn't want CEOs just immediately transitioning to becoming a chairman of the board?
I think that one reason I would say is, to help them also reframe their role as some sort of psychological, but one, a physical absence, but also a psychological reframing. The CEO of the board, who's been there for a while, and let's assume the CEO served for 2 terms of 4 years each, right? That's 8 years. They could serve up to, I think, 3 terms, which is 12. But let's say they served for 8 years. In 8 years, they built strong loyalty. They are, CEO is the powerhouse of the company. And so there's loyalty, there's deference. Also, culturally speaking, we defer a lot to power. We're not known to challenge power easily in this culture. Our culture doesn't really like it. And so this same person who was CEO for 8 years then becomes right about immediately chairman. Remember, he's CEO, so he led the management team. At chairman, he's now chairman of the board. Even if there's a new CEO, there will be a power tussle because he's just literally moved from CEO to chairman. There's a bit of, this is how we used to do it. You have to keep doing it that way. There's also the fact that, depending on who replaces his role, the person may just keep being under his shadows, right? So it's allowed the new executive also. You're gone. You need to go. Okay. Let's allow the new executive run their show. Let's let them bring in their own perspectives to how the business should, be run. Again, to preserve the integrity of the governance of the board. There's always going to be, for someone who's been in the system for a long time, undue influence. It may not necessarily be overt, but it's there. So there's a conflict of interest right there, because, for 8 years you were managing the company. So you know exactly
how it works,
what's going on.
Do you think the 3-year period is, because I'm thinking about it, like, is this even enough time for your influence to wane, especially for, we have sort of celebrity CEOs who are respected and feared, and then our cultural context as well. Just that combination, do you think 3 years is enough? Or should we even be considering, like, outrightly banning a CEO from becoming chairman?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that question from two perspectives, right? I think that also what's happening with the cool-off period is that we're also looking at what's happening in other climes. And other climes is generally around 2 to 3 years. So I think that there's a bit of that. The idea also is that in 2 to 3 years, a lot can change. A lot can change in the sense that, there might be a shake-up. People may have left, particularly people who are maybe loyal and thinking, I can't work with other people, I'm going somewhere else. Or others may have decided, I've been here long enough to change. There might also be changes in the macro environment in which the business is operating that sort of changes things quite a bit. Could we increase it? I think yes, given our own particular reality, cultural nuances. But 3 years seems to be the very minimum that, across the world seems to work. I think is also why we're also trying to align what we're doing with international best practices. So 3 years seems to be a good way to go. I think that increasing it is not a bad idea, but it's not a bad way, not a bad place to be at. Can there be an outright ban? I don't know. And I don't know because I don't know that it is fair to completely close the doors, particularly for CEOs who are part owners of the company. I don't think that it's fair to just completely shut the doors on them because they have put in not just time but also money into that business. They should have some way of sort of keeping an eye on what's going on, where my money is actually, to be honest. But of course, they're not going to be there, forever. After a while, they're going to have to exit if we keep following the tenure system. So I'm not sure an outright ban was the way to go. Maybe a longer cooling off period might be the way to go, but an outright ban, unless there's something particularly egregious about this particular individual, in which case it is then, you just can't be a director anyways. And so it's not a ban specific to CEOs transmuting to chairman. It is a specific ban on a particular individual.
Okay. So looking at this, there has been some uncertainty around who this applies to. Some people have expressed doubt that they are not sure if it applies to their businesses or whether, and even when it takes effect. The SEC says this takes effect immediately, but some people have expressed doubts around that. I'm just wondering, right, for people who perhaps their companies are still very early, very young, and they don't have to be too bothered about how this affects them. How can they prepare for a regulation like this? Because this is something that's probably going to be around for a while before the SEC maybe changes their mind on it. So how can businesses prepare?
I think that it's okay. I think that a bit of cultural change has to happen. And I would say an openness to change
Okay.
And I would say an openness to the discomfort that change brings. Because every change just sort of destabilizes you for a bit, regardless of how beautiful that change is. There's a bit of discomfort in trying to get used to it. We're not particularly, again, culturally speaking, a people that are in love with change that much. We're like, we're very big on if it ain't broken, don't fix it. And there is merit to if it isn't broken, don't fix it. There is merit to it. But given the very importance that INEDs play on the board, it is, and given the challenges we're having, the CEO transmutes right immediately to the chairman, it's important that companies sort of do a bit of look. I know we've always done this in the past, but where is the SEC coming from? Just sort of for a minute, work in the SEC's shoes, remembering that they are protecting. They want your company to continue to survive, but you have a public company, you have millions of shareholders. They're also protecting not just the high net individuals who are your shareholders, but also those really small minorities interest holders. And so if this change will ensure that we have more effective governance on the board, which usually translates into more profitable company, shouldn't we be imbibing it? So early on, just understand this is not a witch hunt process. This is really in the long run for the betterment of the company, and then be open to the change and discomfort, and then start planning around it. Where can we get INEDs? And then how are we also grooming our own internal succession plan for both management and the board? I think with an openness to change and a willingness to sort of see where the regulator is coming from this, and also just sort of see overall how this will improve governance in the company, companies will be fine. There'll be a little bit of disorientation. Change is always hard, but just getting comfortable with that discomfort and thinking, oh well, how can we make the most out of this? Just being optimistic about this is what we need to do. Let's plan for it. And if you're just coming in, you're a new company that is just trying, a new player in the capital market or capital market space, or just a very new public company that's floated, starting with this from today isn't going to be that hard because you're just going to start. So I think that it's a good thing for the market.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. So prepare for change, like sort of just get used to
the discomfort of change.
Thank you so much, Mary, for sharing thoughts with us.